all of us have been influenced by different men in our lives. If you would, pause for a moment and think of a man in your life, someone other than your father that may have had an influence on you. All right? Could be an uncle, could be a grandfather. Was there a man in your life other than your father you felt like had a positive influence? Would anyone like to share? Yes. Yes, jump right in.
Yeah, I can be a leader.
It could be anyone.
Mandela.
Mandela?
Oh, yeah.
Very good. And how did Mandela influence your life?
Because I read his biography and he was incarcerated for 27 years.
Okay.
And he was sent to this island and because of he was a lawyer, but he was against what was happening politically in the
apartheid.
Right. So I remember when the guard said, "Okay, I'm throwing the keys away. You're not gonna see your family." And I said, "What?" So he suffered a lot. But he never lost his. He knew that he somehow he would come out and he. You know, he came out and he became a president.
Very good. You know, that's a good example in that there's going to be a lot of those virtues, qualities, things that we could pick up from great leaders like Mandela. One, in terms of a good example of fatherhood, and I'm glad you brought that out, is our current president, President Barack Obama. He's a great example of a father, and I'm surprised. Some of you may have actually had him on your list when you were listing those who are good fathers and some of the characteristics. Some of you may be familiar with this, but you know, during it wasn't the inauguration, but it was the night he was elected president. And they had the big celebration in Chicago, some of you may remember. It was like thousands of people waiting on the president to speak. Finally, you've been elected. And he said in the middle of all of this celebration going on, people singing and doing poems and all kind of stuff. And he said, Michelle leaned over to him and said, I know you the president and everything, but you still got to take them girls to school in the morning. So again, regardless of our role, in this case, we're talking about the president. He still was providing a good example of manhood. There's someone else, maybe a little closer to you, other than your father, that influenced your life? Yes.
I mean, for me, it's Cub Scout Master. I mean, my mother would tell on Sunday, because my Cub Scout was connected to the church.
Okay.
Which, again, those were deacons, Sunday school superintendent. So if I cut up during the school week, that report went to them on Sunday.
Okay.
And Tuesday was Cub Scout night. We had what was called the belt lines.
I see.
Where those kids' parents that reported, the other Cub Scouts, we took our belts off, and you had to walk between our legs and we disciplined.
Wow, okay.
So that's
interesting.
That was one of the things that you just did not want to face.
All right, let me ask you this, because it sounds like what you're describing is you knew there was a level of accountability for your behavior and your actions beyond your household. Is that correct?
It was like, it was neighborhood.
And it sounds like what you're describing is a concept that really can work effectively if we're on the same page. This notion of it takes a village to raise a child. Now, my expectation, regardless of whether or not you share right now, we've all been influenced by men other than our fathers. Whether we recognize it or not, that could be a good or bad influence. And what I'd like to reinforce, and by taking a look at this type of self-awareness, is let's be sensitive to those men that have impacted our lives, because our ability to be sensitive to that is going to give us the ability to explore those resources with other families. It's going to give us the ability to talk about coaches, or talk about the deacon in the church that was willing to invite you to the prayer meeting. It's going to be the friend, you know, your friend's father that was willing to take you to Six Flags when your dad wasn't there. It's going to have us to think about those men and whether or not there may be men in these children's lives that may have or potentially have the same impact. In short, we're influenced by more than just our father, and a part of exploring those resources is exploring some of these other men in our lives. Sir, you wanted to share?
Yeah, my father passed when I was 10, but I had 3 older brothers who were soon that older.
Wow.
My father wasn't home with us. So
very good.
There's some level was that.
But your older brothers were able to step in some instances, probably be the nurturer. When you probably fought, come here. Probably teach you. Yeah. And it may not have been math, But say, man, if you want to get a date with her, this is how you ask, right? Some things you do. Or you know what? You know, mom not looking, let me let you drive a little while. Teach you how to drive, right? So in short, I'm glad you shared that example because it's more than just our father that can do that. And again, are we willing to explore these resources with families? Or we just automatically assume, oh, they're growing up without their father. Just take that check off the list. Yes, sir. Did you have something?
I know everybody likes to, mention biological fathers, but stepfathers.
Very good.
My father was out of my life since I was 2.
I see.
So my stepfather stepped in the picture when I was about 13. I gave him a real hard time.
Okay.
Because to me, nobody was going to be good enough for my mother.
Right.
But he kind of showed me that, I'm going to be here regardless of how you feel.
Wow.
Still here to this day.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Learned a lot from him.
Wonderful. Learn a lot from him, and your relationship with him didn't stop at 13.
Yeah.
This is someone that you still could probably call and say, hey.
Well, I mean, I call him, I don't even talk to my real father.
Wow.
So he is.
That is so powerful. I got a slide. We're going to talk about different roles, or we're going to talk about men in different situations. And the reason why what you're saying is so critically important is because as professionals, in order for us to feel like we can work with the father, it has to be the biological father. But that's not correct because we got to be prepared to work with men in different situations because the cases or the families that we work with, it may not always fit that norm. Mom, dad, children, house, white picket fence. Sometimes those dynamics aren't as straightforward, so that's why that's so important to consider. But if you would, before we move away from this, I wanted to share one experience that I had. As a result of training DFACS case managers, I met one young man, and I always enjoy having men in the room whenever we do our fatherhood presentation. Because I'm hoping men could confirm and support, similar to your comment, some of the things that I've experienced. But I had this one case manager stand up in class and he boldly said, no man has had an influence in my life. It threw me off for a minute. I had never heard anything like that, especially from a young man, and he felt proud in saying it. Now I knew we had to address that because in order for him to be effective in working with families, he's got to take a closer look at this notion of no man has had an influence in my life. And he began to tell his story. He grew up in a household with his grandmother and his mother. Both his grandmother and his mother were abused by men, both physically and sexually. So throughout his life, they were protecting him by keeping him away from men. Mom, I want to play football. Nah, you can't play football. I want to stay after school. They got this thing going on. Nah, you can't stay after school. Mom, I want to go to Bible study because they said they got youth. No, you can't, because you already know what's happening in the church, right? And so I began to think about it. And he said, throughout school, never had any male teachers. Now, many of us could look at the same thing and didn't have any men teachers. In short, he went throughout life and now is a professional responsible for working with other families, and he's able to conclude that no man has had a positive influence in his life. Again, when we begin to assess our personal values, if we have that experience, even if we never say it in the back of our mind, why should I talk with this stepdad? Why should I spend time reaching out to this father that lives in another state or way across town? Because a man can't do nothing for you. He's already living with his mother and his grandmother. What can the man do for him? That's how that individual would think based on their experiences and their perceptions. So what they've lived is going to directly impact the families that they work with. Thank you for nodding. Because see, I know it's a little difficult, and forgive me if I step on toes right here, but I work in a workforce that's made up primarily of women. Some of my coworkers have had negative experiences with their husband or the fathers of their children. I'm talking about just last night. And now they got to come to work, and they're being told, you got to go out there and find that boyfriend. That boyfriend, he ain't paying no bills. He didn't pay no child support. He don't even come see the children. Now, in the back of their mind, they're thinking about that man that they're having a problem with. But I'm a professional. I can come to work and leave that outside. No, we can't. We're the sum total of all of our experiences. So then we have a case manager that believes, why should I go looking for that dad, making my life more difficult, and he's just a deadbeat dad? In the interest of time, I'll share this in such a way. Very often, those who we perceive as deadbeat dads are not deadbeat dads. We call them dead broke dads. They're not showing up because they don't feel adequate. I don't have no money. And I know this is all about child support. This is all about finances. Why? Because society has placed the primary role of a father as financial. He didn't know you wanted him to come in so you could explore other ideas how he could be a teacher, support his child right now as the child's going through the educational assessment or the mental health assessment, or how his paternal relatives may be able to serve as a resource for the child. Only thing he's hearing is, y'all want me to come in so you can get some child support from me. All right? So if you would, and again, I'm sharing the information rapid fire, but in conclusion, before we move away from this, our personal experiences influence the way we work with fathers. And in order for us to be more effective, regardless of your agency, your program area, I strongly encourage you to take a closer look at the role your father has played in your life and the other men currently in your life is playing. It will have an impact on the work that we do.